Hey guys, what is up and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I am going to be showing you exactly how you can set up and use Yuzu, this Nintendo Switch emulator, on your own personal computer. Before we get started, there are some recommended system specs that you are going to need to qualify for in order to actually run this emulator in any kind of a usable fashion. First and foremost, you are going to need a fairly powerful CPU. Bear in mind that this emulator is still very much in the early stages of development, so as time goes past, optimization is going to get better, but as with any emulator on the market or available for download, especially in relation to modern ones like RPCS3, CMU emulator or any others, you are going to need a fairly beefy CPU in order to get the best possible performance, and as always, the better the CPU and the higher the core clock, the better your performance is going to be. You are also going to need a GPU that supports at least OpenGL 4.3 at this point in time. While a Vulkan backend is in development for this emulator, it is nowhere near to being implemented or in a usable fashion. The developers of this emulator also recommend that your system has at least 8GB of RAM. However, I myself, after playing this emulator and many of its games, would definitely recommend at least 12 or 16GB if you want to have the best possible experience. Now that that's all out of the way, let's get this guide started. Okay, so once your computer is up to spec and you are sure it is going to be okay to run Yuzu emulator, the next thing you want to do is to open your browser and come to this web address. You will find this linked down in the description of this video. Next, you want to come to this download tab at the very top of the page right here. Once on this page, you want to scroll down and you want to click this download for Windows x64 button right here. This will begin downloading the Yuzu installer application, which we are going to be using to install Yuzu Nightly and Yuzu Canary. You can also click this view package listing. These will give you all of the different builds of Yuzu Canary if you require to use a specific Canary build version. You can see the different operating systems listed right here. Alternatively, you can also click right here and it will bring you to the Yuzu GitHub. Right here you can see all of the different Canary versions. You are going to need to make sure that you always use the Yuzu Windows MSVC version of Canary or Nightly. If you want to download this, all you need to do is click this zip file right here and it will download. Since we're not going to be using this installation method, let's close this window and get started with our setup. Next, all you want to do is actually double click on this install icon and click run. You can see that we are given the option to select which packages we want to install. Let's just select Nightly and Canary and next click this install button. Once you have clicked the install button, you can see that Yuzu Canary and Nightly are now both being downloaded and set up on your own personal computer. We need to wait for this process to fully complete before we can actually launch either versions of the emulator. Let's simply close this tool and open our start menu. Once you close the tool and come down to your start menu, you should be able to easily find your Yuzu Canary version, the version we're going to be using in this video. I'm simply going to open mine. Basically, when you use either of these shortcuts from your start menu, it is going to make sure that you are always on the latest version of Yuzu Canary. I'm simply going to select yes to any of the telemetry data, and next we're going to show you how you can set up your emulator. Using this option, you can install game updates and DLCs. Using a load or folder, you can load games from their folders or files, and you can also select your game directory by selecting this option right here. Now obviously you're going to be needing some games to play on this emulator. Unfortunately, at least in this video, I can't provide you any game files. If you are having trouble getting your games from your Switch or getting your games downloaded, you will find a link down in the description of this video that's going to tell you exactly how you can transfer and dump your games from your Nintendo Switch. If you are having any problems, as I said, with getting your games, do not be afraid to join my Discord and I will help you out in any way I possibly can. Okay, so now we need to set up our game directory. My games are stored on my eDisk. They are stored in my Switch stuff and they are stored in this folder titled Switch Games. You want to make sure that you select the folder that contains your games, not your games individually. Once I've done so, you can see my games are all appearing right here. Next, to come back to emulation, configure, and we're going to look at some settings for the emulator. You want to make sure that you are using search subdirectories for games. This will make sure that if you are using any folder-based directories for games, your games will be successfully found. You also want to use enable CPU JIT and enable NFC if you wish to use amiibos. Coming to games list, in this section I generally set standard 64 by 64 as it looks best to me, and for this row text I generally set both of these to title name. Clicking OK, you can see that doing this makes it so only the game's name appears. Let's come back to emulation, configure, and back to games list. We're done with this section and let's come to system. You can see right here that you are able to create a profile which will enable you to use multiple different accounts on Yuzu emulator in order to use different save directories and different save paths. Simply click the add button, enter your user profile name, click OK, and that's basically it. You are now done creating users. You can simply highlight your user and set an image as I have done with my above one. Since I am only going to be using my own main account, I'm simply going to select this one, click the remove button, click yes, and you can see it's as easy as that to manage any of these accounts. Next, coming across to input, you want to make sure that you map your controllers correctly. As you can see in this new input window, you can map several different controllers. I'm going to select Pro Controller for my first controller, and then I'm going to map my controller. If you're having any issues with mapping your controller, simply Google the term Wii U Pro Controller layout and map your own select controller so that it matches exactly what you see right here. In order to map your left and your right sticks, all you have to do is click Set Analog Stick, click OK, and then press left and up on your left analog stick, and for your right analog stick do the same, click Set Analog Stick, OK, and then click left and up. Once you have this done, we're going to move on to the shoulder buttons. Simply map these as shown. L is L1 on a PS4 controller and ZL is L2. Sometimes at this point in time in Yuzu emulator, when you are mapping your ZL and ZR buttons, it will appear as a negative value. However, you are required to have these as a positive value. As you can see, mine is set to axis 2+, and this one should be set to axis 5+. In order to map it correctly, all you need to do is hold down the trigger before you press the map button, and then release the trigger, and it should be successfully mapped to axis 5+ instead of axis 5-. Please do make sure to have these mapped correctly, as you will have input related problems if they are not mapped to positive values. Once you have every other button set up, simply click OK and you are now done. Now for certain games like Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, you need to use this Joy-Con docked mode. Once again, as we did before, you're going to need to map these inputs as you did in the last section with the Pro Controller. With these docked inputs, you can also set your specific controller color. Even though it doesn't realistically affect anything, it's still a nice little feature to have in the emulator. Once you have set any custom controller colors and have all your controller mappings set up, click OK and we are now basically done with input. You can also adjust this touchscreen by clicking advanced, but it is highly ill-advised to do so as the optimized defaults generally work best. You can also use other controls like for example mouse. You can select it and click advanced, and you can also change these buttons, but as I previously said, it is highly ill-advised to do so as the optimized defaults seem to work best. Simply click OK and we are now basically done with input. Inside of this input window is basically where we can change from docked to portable mode also. We'll be coming back to that a little bit later on. And if there are any two-player games you want to play on the emulator, you simply select another Pro Controller and map it as before. Moving across to the graphics tabs, this is where you have your limit speed percentage. As you can see, the default is set to 100%, however, if there are any games that seem to be running at over double the speed or triple the speed, simply set this to a value of either 33% or 50%. You can also see this use accurate GPU emulation. This setting is generally just for debugging or finding graphical issues in games, and you also have an internal resolution setting which at this point in time is not currently working. Leaving this at the native resolution of 1280 by 720 is generally advised. You can also change this background color to a different color. This will generally change just the small bars that may appear around your game if you are using a different aspect ratio monitor. Moving across to audio, I would highly advise setting this output engine just to auto, and I would also highly advise disabling audio stretching, as it tends to just make audio in pretty much any game horrible. You can also set your audio device, although I generally leave mine at auto so it will use my system's default. Here you can adjust your system volume. I generally leave mine at a lower value, generally under 80%. Moving across into debug, this stuff is mainly for debugging and it doesn't really affect you too much, and if you wish to submit compatibility reports for your games, you can simply click this sign up button right here, create an account on the provided website, and then you enter the information right here and click verify. This will allow you to submit compatibility reports on the playability of any of your games. You can also click this box right here in order to enable Discord rich presence. We're now basically done with any of these settings in this configure window. Before you load any games, you are going to require your keys from your Nintendo Switch console. These keys are going to be stored in this location, Yuzu, this folder in app data roaming Yuzu. I'm just going to quickly show you how you can easily find this app data folder right here. Let's close this folder. Next you want to hit Windows key and R, and in this field you want to hit percentage, app data, percentage, and then hit enter. Once you hit enter, it should open your app data roaming folder. All you want to do is scroll down until you find your Yuzu folder. Opening this Yuzu folder, you are required to make this keys folder. In order to make a new folder, all you need to do is right click here, come down to new, and then make a new folder, and as I said, title this folder keys. Once you have this keys folder made, you need to proceed into here, and this is where your prod.keys or keys.txt file needs to go. This title keys auto-generated is made automatically by Yuzu and is based off the games you currently have in your games list. Now, while I can't give you this prod.key or any of your keys from your Switch console, I'm going to show you the keys that you do need. At this point in time, the required keys start at master key source, as you can see at the top right here, and when you scroll down to the very bottom of this list, it ends in keyblob 05. As with games, I cannot provide you with any of these system keys or title keys. If you are having any trouble with finding or getting them, please do join my Discord and ask in any of the channels over there. These keys are absolutely integral and are basically required in order for you to decode and decrypt any of your games for use on the emulator. The games just will not run without them. So once you have all of the data you just saw in my previous text document, what you need to do is you need to right click, create a new text document, and then you want to paste all of the data you saw in my previous text document into this one right here. You need to make sure to show file extension name, simply click view and tick this box, and then once you have all the data pasted into this new text document, into this field right here is where you want to have all of that data I previously showed. Simply close this file, and then you need to rename it. Simply right click, come to rename, and then name it PROD. Make sure the spelling is correct. You also need to make sure that the extension is .keys instead of .txt, as it will not work otherwise. Simply rename once again and change this .txt to .keys, and once you press enter, and if you have successfully entered all of the key data into this text document, this will successfully work and you will now be able to boot and decrypt any of your games on this Nintendo Switch emulator. As I've already said, if you are having any trouble with getting your keys from your console, do not be afraid to ask over in my Discord. We will help you in any way we possibly can. Once you have your prod.keys in this folder, you are now basically ready to launch any of your games. Let's just expand this window a little bit and scroll down our list. You can see right here that I have Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu. With any of your games, if you right click it, you can see your open save data location, open mod data location, dump ROMFS, copy title ID to clipboard, and navigate to the game database entry. If you want to use any kind of save data options, you simply click open save data, and as you saw me make earlier, it is going to ask me which account I wish to use the save data from. Since I selected my own account, here is the save data from my account. This is exactly how you edit any save data for any of your games. Doing the same thing with Octopath Traveler and selecting the same account will show me the save data from that select account. Okay, so now that we have everything set up, let's now boot Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and see how it is running at this point on this emulator. And there we go, we are now booted into the title screen of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu. Simply select your controller, select the top option, and it should boot you into the title menu of the game. Please be very aware of the fact that this Nintendo Switch emulator is still very much so early in development, so you should definitely expect bugs, glitches, and fairly bad performance, at least at this point in time of this emulator's development. Okay, so I'm now going to show you exactly what you need to do if you want to launch different games on the emulator. So while you do have the option to stop emulation and boot a different game, you should definitely not do this. As you can see right now, Yuzu emulator is using around 6.5 gigabytes of RAM on my system. However, if I come to emulation and if I click this stop button, you can see that Yuzu is still using a very high amount of RAM. Now if I come down and if I go to launch Super Mario Odyssey, Yuzu is going to allocate about another 4.5 gigabytes of RAM to this game title, meaning that you are going to run out of RAM very quickly if you start using the emulator in this way. Basically, what you want to do after you have finished playing a game is click the X, close the emulation window completely, and you need to make sure that it has completely disappeared from your task manager. Next, you want to relaunch Yuzu Canary, and then you can successfully reload any of your games. You can see that on initial boot, Yuzu emulator does not use much RAM. However, when I load a game, for example Super Mario Odyssey, you will see that straight away Yuzu emulator is allocating about 4.5 gigabytes of RAM to this game's process. Let's now load into the title menu of Super Mario Odyssey, and we're going to take a look at some of this emulator's features, mostly in relation to limiting frame rate speed. So once you get into the title menu of any of your games, especially here in Super Mario Odyssey, you can see I'm running at a fairly stable 60 FPS. Coming to emulation, configure, and across to the graphics tab, if I turn off this limit speed percentage and click OK, you should see that my frame rate is going to astronomically rise to around 160 frames per second. This is basically not what you want to do, as you do not want your games to have massive speed up, especially so if your computer is capable of outputting that kind of performance. Limiting it back to 60 frames per second is probably the best choice of action at this point in time. So coming to data management, load, let's actually get ourselves loaded into Sand Kingdom and see what our performance is like now that I have freshly installed this Canary version of Yuzu. Once you get loaded into your game for the very first time, especially upon the first time of loading the emulator, you will most likely notice that your performance, at least in Super Mario Odyssey and many other games, is going to be very poor. You can see mine is around 25 or 30 frames per second. However, if you just give it a few seconds, some people have reported that it can take up to 35 or 40 seconds, your performance should stabilize, and as you can see, mine has jumped straight up to between around 45 and 60 frames per second. Let's move up to this Oasis area where I'm going to show you the difference in visuals between using docked mode and using portable mode. As you can see, the visuals are a bit grainy and pixelated. Coming to emulation, configure, and next you want to come to this input setting window. Let's move it to the side, and when I enable this use docked mode and click the OK button at the bottom of this window, you should see that the game will pause for a few seconds and then it will switch to the docked mode. In this docked mode, you get much better visual fidelity in practically all of your games. However, please do be aware that not every single game on this emulator works at this very moment in time in this docked mode. Performance-wise, at least on my own personal system containing an 8700K and a 980 Ti, I do not notice any performance difference between swapping between the docked mode and undocked. You can even see that when I swapped into the docked mode where I have better visuals, I actually got better performance for some reason right now. So hopefully everything you've seen in this guide is going to help you with your setup of Yuzu, this Nintendo Switch emulator. As I've already said multiple times guys, if you're having any issues with anything I've shown in this video, do not be afraid to drop a message over in my Discord. You will find a link for that down in the description of this video. So once again guys, cheers for checking out this video. Remember to like it if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, and as always, subscribe to the channel if you want to see all future videos from me.